why is a box kick negative? Why was the fan going, oh, here comes one? It was because they understood what was going to happen for the next 2 or 3 minutes, in my opinion, where they knew there was not going to be a contest at the back end of that kick.
And when you see a lot of those cleanouts, you realise exactly what you're saying, how difficult an ask we are putting on a player to change.
There's such a hot topic, isn't there, around what is the state of the game at the moment? And there's always talk around we need to speed the ball up, we need more ball in play.
There's always so much opinion. Trying to gather that opinion at times, I think, is like shaping fog. It's very difficult. If you ask my opinion on where the shape of the game is, I'm definitely on the positive side of things.
Hello and welcome to the Players Podcast from International Rugby Players Association, the first of 2026. My name is Owen, and alongside me I'm joined as always by IRPA Chief of Rugby Operations Conrad Smith and Rachael Burford, Head of Women's Rugby. And today's guest is a former Irish fullback who retired from the game and went into coaching 2 World Cup medals later, and he's finally realising his dream by appearing on the Players Podcast. We're delighted to have Felix Jones from South Africa on the show today. You're very welcome, Felix.
Thanks for having me on. Hey Rachel, hey Conrad.
Well, just for context, in about a month's time, the rugby world gathers in London for the Shape of the Game conference, where the laws and the direction of our game will be discussed. And we're going to get into a lot of that with Felix, Conrad and Rachael today. And as you can imagine, there'll be lots to discuss. But first, Felix, tell us a bit about the transition you had from playing in Ireland and going into coaching. How did that come about? And how was that leaving the game?
Yeah, well, I was playing in Munster at the time, and I had to retire with a neck injury. And pretty soon after that, I'd started a sports psychology masters, and was still in and around the University of Limerick, which is obviously where Munster train. And it was the late Anthony Foley. He actually asked me to kind of come back in a couple of times and say, look, would you like to have a look at training and, help out here or there with, various players or mini groups. So I did that a few times and thought, yeah, okay, this is okay. And started to catch that coaching bug a little bit, and went over to the UK. I actually rang Jim Mallender and I said, listen, can I coach an area of the game for you? And he was coaching Northampton at the time. He was like, who are you? And I'm nobody really, but I'll just, if you let me come over, I'll do it. He said, do you want be paid? And I said, no, I just want to see if I can do this. And did that a few times. I visited a couple of different clubs and amateur, professional, and kind of got a bit of a kick out of it. And then it wasn't really until Rassie Erasmus came in the following year, and I met Rassie, and we had seemed to strike a bit of a connection there. And he said, look, I'm looking for an extra set of hands, so would you be interested? And that's how I kind of got into it.
Is it a learn on the job kind of thing, Felix? I mean, obviously you were doing your masters, and you've been around coaching setups and high performance environments for years before that. But as regards coaching, is it something that you can't really learn out of a book? I imagine you got to learn as you go.
Well, nobody. Well, not to my knowledge, nobody hands you a manual and goes, right, this is how you coach professional rugby. So what I found was, coming out as a player, probably had quite strong opinions on certain things and how to do things, and very quickly that that gets recalibrated, and you realize, oh wow, there's so much I don't know, and there's so many other dynamics that you have to be aware of. It's not just coaching or seeing a piece of play that you have an opinion on. There's all these other dynamics that are at play, and how people are relating to each other, and the environment, and just really thinking about, why are you doing something? And then there's a tactical part, and working with the other coaches and opposition, what they're trying to achieve and stuff. So it very, very quickly opened my eyes as to all the different beautiful things and difficult things about rugby.
Cool. Well, look, we're as I mentioned there earlier, we're going to talk about shape of the game. Rachael, you're going to be involved in that. What do you think yourself and Felix and Conrad will be discussing when that comes around?
I think always there's such a hot topic, isn't there, around what is the state of the game at the moment? And there's always talk around we need to speed the ball up, we need more ball in play. TMO inventions, and the opportunity to come together with all stakeholders to discuss the laws of the game and the direction that it's taking. I guess from Felix, from your point of view, like what's your opinion on where the shape of the game is at the moment?
Yeah, it's always
It's a
like
big
you said,
question.
yeah, it's a big one because, like you said, there's always so much opinion, and like trying to gather that opinion at times, I think, is like shaping fog. It's very difficult. If you ask my opinion on where the shape of the game is, I'm definitely on the positive side of things. I think things are in a really good shape, and it's hard to use stats just to describe that because, like you said, someone might say, "Oh, well, there's ball and play metrics that matter," and I'm not one of those believers. I'm not sure ball and play is a really good indicator of a good game or not. I think a really good game is determined by the contest. I think that's what fans, in my opinion, and that's what I enjoy watching a game about is the contest, and that contest can be the contest at a breakdown. It could be the contest in a line out or an aerial contest, or it could be the contest of two different styles of knowing one team is going to come with a certain style of play versus another team's style of play. Or it could be the contest of two different cultures clashing. And I think rugby has such a unique ability to marry up all these different contests and all these many different ways of playing the game, and we should be celebrating it. So I know sometimes this time of year when the shape of the game stuff comes up, I think there's quite a lot of potential negativity that people want to shout about. But in my opinion, there's so many positive things that we should be celebrating or championing compared to other sports.
Felix, like for my part, completely agree with pretty much all that you've just said in terms of the positivity around the game. We've got a lot to celebrate, and certain metrics that get banded about, particularly in a negative way, ball and play, aren't always an accurate way of measuring the game, and maybe are unduly focused. One thing we have talked about with previous people on this podcast, we've had referees, we've talked about broadcast and what the broadcasters want, what the fans want, just in terms of stakeholders. So it's obviously a balance in rugby when we talk about shape of the game. There's the coaches like yourself, and they're would you say, are high performance driven around what they want and the equality they want in the game, and what they want the referee to do is, let's be honest, make the right, from your perspective, you want them to make the right call all the time, potentially even if that slows down the game. Whereas maybe, and I'm just speaking hypothetically and asking for your opinion around this, but a fan or a broadcaster may not have that same view and may think, look, we just want a fast game. Doesn't matter if it's a wrong call. Do you sense that sort of tension in our game and potentially a reason for some of the negativity potentially and what gets discussed at the shape of the game?
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that narrative, the two different narratives that you're talking about, and the lens. I'm going to have a lens, and players going to have a lens, and a broadcaster or a fan's going to have a certain lens. And obviously, my lens. You're right. You're accurate in assuming what my lens would be. My lens is that I want the game to be officiated as accurately as possible, and I think that's really important for the integrity of the sport, particularly at the highest level. I think us sacrificing accuracy for the sake of flow or for the sake of an extra 30 seconds of the game going on that 30 seconds longer, I don't think is worth it, because if we talk about it at the highest level, and we have a situation in a massive game, and I would pose this to anyone that's really making the argument, which I'm happy to accept that other people are going to have different views. But if you can imagine the team that you're supporting or the international union that you follow, and you were to lose a World Cup final or a World Cup knockout game or a really important pool game because the referee or the TMO or somebody didn't take the time to make sure they got the call right, be it a piece of cynical play, like somebody slapping the ball out of a ruck that went unnoticed, or a try was awarded or not awarded correctly. And I know there's always going to be debate on, even sometimes when they do come in and take their time with things, and sometimes there's human error there. But I don't think we can sacrifice accuracy over flow, not at the elite level. I think it jeopardizes things too much.
And then I suppose because that, I think, leads into the head contact process, because this is where this is talked about a lot for one reason or another, rightly or wrongly at the moment. So we see, and we saw through the November internationals, a lot of incidents that went through the head contact process. There was delays in the game. There was a long time for the referees to make those decisions. A lot of them, some of them were overturned post-match, which I think we'd all agree is not a good look for the game. Is that a result maybe of that sort of tension we're talking about? Like, on the one hand, we want accuracy, but then the referees feel like we've got to keep the game going. And then, does that end up causing inaccuracies in decision making? And what then is I suppose the question is, what then is your view around the head contact process? Have we got that right at the moment, or do we need further adjustments with that part of the game?
Yeah. Okay. I'll try and deconstruct some of it. First of all, I think when we're talking about the referees and the TMOs and all the officials, and like, we obviously have to understand their position on within this shape of the game, and that they're being pulled in many different directions, and all of us with all these different lenses are pulling them a certain way. In my view, like, their main job is to make sure there's a fair or equitable and safe contest. I think that's their primary job, and any priority thereafter that goes down that priority list. So I think, one, understanding their position on these, and then two, with regards to the head contact process, which obviously we've been on certain calibration calls together at times, Conrad, and it's evolved over the years. I think is doing a really, it's serving its purpose really well, and is constantly evolving, and it's having a lot of input and a lot of work that has gone in behind the scenes, as you're aware, behind it. And I think this November really was the perfect storm, because there was a huge focus going into this year, or in preparation of that November, certainly around, we'd had a lot of discussions around shoulder charges and some of the terminology on the head contact process, which of course was a derivative of the high tackle framework. It was originally the high tackle framework, and evolved eventually into the head contact process, around what was always an illegal act, and I think it was definitely exasperated over November. Some of it was also because of, if we looked at the Tyke Byrne clip in against New Zealand in Chicago, where there wasn't a big screen, and there was and I know you guys were talking about this with Brendan Pickrell before, and however many replays, and the referee was looking at a tiny screen down below, and I think that definitely also draw a bigger light to this. So I don't have an exact answer to say, the head contact process is good or bad. It's not as black and white as that. I think there's a huge amount of work that goes in behind it. And I think the officials are doing their very best to make sure things are safe and then fair. But there's work still to be done, and I think we'll hopefully see in this Six Nations. I know they've put a lot of work in behind it again to try and clear up some of these shoulder charges, the terminology that I mentioned before. So I understand, to answer your question, yes, I understand why sometimes the sentiment can be, well, we'd rather just get a decision and move things on. But the referees have been pulled in so many ways, and safety is World Rugby's number one priority. So I understand why they have to take their time and try and get it right.
And then I suppose a follow-up from there, and I know, and as you referred to, the World Rugby calibration calls, so Rach, Felix, myself, we're all involved in that process. Again, I think we'd all agree it's a great process. It's incredibly challenging, but it puts the spotlight on referees, players, coaches, judicial officers, all trying to get consistency and clarity around what we're seeing, particularly with the head contact process. One part of that, something I know Rach and I have really enjoyed, your perspective you've given to that group, is the discussion around cleanouts and how the cleanout and the tackle, whilst treated the same in the head contact process, is actually such a different action in the game, such a different dynamic involved as it happens. And then it then sort of begs the question, should we be dealing with it with the same process? And maybe it's easiest, I know we've got a clip to show Owen, and maybe we can, if you're happy, talk through that and maybe give some of the reasoning as to why you've spoken about this in the past and what we really mean.
Yeah. So this is obviously Brazil are about to do a clear out here, and there happens to be head contact. And I think this clip gets referred up, and there's slow motions and everything goes through it. And I think maybe just to just reiterate what I mentioned before is that the head contact process is obviously going to be applied here, but I think what's important to remember, and we've reminded ourselves on these calls a few times, is that the head contact process was originally brought in was derived from the high tackle framework, and a tackle and a clean out at a ruck are obviously fundamentally different things. And I mean, one of the things fundamentally different is already at a ruck, if you look at the height with which everyone is at in this situation, is automatically lower. Everybody is much lower to begin with. Generally in a ruck, there are more dynamic movements. So there's 3, 4, potentially 4 or 5 people involved in a ruck. So immediately there's more dynamics involved. And the last piece here, which I think is probably where we're getting to and we're making improvements, is if we looked at this one more time, and I think this is really important, is the difference between pause now. Just pause it there. So when that player is beginning to maybe back 2 or 3 frames, number 17 for Brazil, when he's preparing to make this clear out here at this point, about there, like he's already beginning to lower his center of mass, and he's targeted an area that he believes is safe, probably on the guy's shoulder or on an arm. And I think, just from being in this situation and coaching guys, I think once a player starts to commit to what he believes is a safe action and begins to lower his center of mass, and he starts preparing himself from preparation phase to commit to that action, which he believes is safe. When you do lower your center of mass and you start committing to that action, it's very difficult to change or react to what is considered a late or a significant movement. In a tackle, it's fairly well calibrated what is a late or significant movement from, a ball carrier. But in a breakdown, I think we're getting there with this, so that we're understanding that even tiny movements, particularly in a ruck like this, when everything is already lower, all the distances come down a little bit in terms of appreciating what is significant or not. Because when you've committed yourself and you've already lowered your center of mass, it's really difficult to react to what might even be 6 inches or 3 or 4 inches movement left or right. So when I say to this clip, this player is committed, and that blue player pops up, whether that's his own action or a contributing action of number 19 for Brazil, it's really difficult then for 17 to react to that and change the course of his I suppose target area. And that's why, on this specific clip, there was agreement that actually the player had done nothing wrong. He had committed himself to a safe action, and for reasons outside of his control, there was head contact thereafter. I've probably made that a little bit more long-winded, but it's probably important to understand the context with which the breakdown is being looked at now compared to tackles.
Do you think this is an example? Like, I know we discussed that clip on the calibration call. We've made this point in calibration calls, and I think even on this podcast with Brendan, but when you use the slow motion replay, you make this you actually make this really difficult, because the game is not played in slow-mo. It's played at live speed. And when you see a lot of those cleanouts, you realize exactly what you're saying, how difficult an ask we are putting on a player to change in those tiny instances. When he is starting, in this instance, he is starting with a legal clean-out action to make contact with the legal part of the jackler's body. and then in a split second, for reasons, as you say, completely out of his control, he is making head contact, and now we're sanctioning him. Do you think there's an over-reliance on the slow motion?
Yeah, a great question. I don't know if I could say there's an over-reliance, but I think there is a disproportionate amount of weight that people attribute to when they see it. So we have to remember, let's say a fan going to the game or somebody in the stadium, they haven't looked at the amount of high tackles and these calibration calls that all these other officials have. So when they see something, you get the boos or the ooh, and the home team will give it this one and the away team will give it that one. So I think we have to first of all understand that they don't have the same understanding that maybe necessarily the referees do. What I think the slow motion replay is really vital for is understanding some of the minor details that the referee's eye will be drawn to. So the point of contact, the attempt to wrap, these small significant changes that we just mentioned there, and I think they're really important for the referee to help him determine to navigate through the framework and to help determine the whatever you want to call it, intent, the point of contact, the level of danger, all these different pieces. But I'm hearing more and more the referees saying, I need to see it in real time. I need to see it in full speed.
Yeah.
And I think the referees have a good balance of that currently, but probably it isn't actually fully appreciated on the fan side. And that's probably also, we're not doing ourselves many favors there when we have 15 replays or whatever, and they're seeing the slow-mo over and over. I don't think the referees are over-relying on it, but it's important that we all keep checking ourselves and we don't get carried away. When we see a slow-motion replay and we see head contact, that we don't all immediately jump to the worst case scenario. I think the slow motion replay is important to pick up finer details to get to the right decision.
I think I can agree with that. I completely understand the role for the slow motion, but there is, as long as they're seeing it at full speed, to then decide on things like the reaction, completely agree. And so there's a role for both. You did touch on something else, slightly changing tack around just the instructions to referees. And we've probably covered this a bit already, but I know this is something, again, that is going to be talked about at the Shape of Game. Just what we want the referees to do, like what their role is in the game. And having, dealt with in our role, we speak to a lot of the match officials, and they are constantly tell us that they don't set out to construct how they officiate the game. They want to be directed by the game as to how they manage the match.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So, what we want to penalise, what we want to place emphasis on, the referees don't decide that themselves. They want World Rugby, and that involves obviously what we're talking about, the collection of stakeholders to tell the referees what we want them to do. Do you feel the match officials are well instructed? Are they clear on what they're trying to do? And I suppose, again, this is going to fall into that balance between the speed of the game, the accuracy of decision making, the safety.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. We're aware of the pull. We're aware of all the different directions and the stakeholders' directions that they're pulling them in. But again, I go back to their first priority is to make sure the contest is fair and that the game is safe. And anything after that should be down the priority list. One of the areas that I think in general we will help everyone with is further investment into match officiating and getting the best people through and getting the best people up into the TMO box and providing them with more technology based on whatever they feel will help them. And I think that area is probably under discussed. We're losing loads. I mean, we have Jaco Piper who's involved in South Africa. You've seen it in France with multiple teams now signing what were some of the best referees in the world. And I think we're losing these really sharp-minded people. The officiating circles are losing these really sharp-minded people when they could become the TMO if they, if it was made attractive enough for them, or maybe there's a younger official that's coming through, and he wants to specialize in that area, and they see it as a really attractive option. So I think we have to keep making it easier for the referees, or make it a bigger want for the referees to keep getting in there, to keep numbers coming through, to keep getting the best people. And I think that's probably the one thing I'd say that will help them the most, is further investment into it.
Agree.
I know you mentioned before this common language thing, for referees, that if there was a common language, you mentioned before that if there was a common language that the referees could, which I'm sure they do work on, but I think that was, when I heard that, I thought that was a really good idea, because obviously we're dealing with all different types of languages, within their own officiating teams and within our own teams, and sometimes neutral venues, and I think that would be a massive thing, to see more consistency in that. I think that would help also with the TMO piece that I think some people do have a gripe with. It's not a personal gripe of mine, but that would also make things a little bit more efficient if we got some more familiarity around that, and that has been one of the things that we've fed back in as well. But generally speaking, we think they're doing a great job, and we're aware of all these different pulls. But that, I thought your guys' suggestion on that was quite good.
It's adding layers, isn't it, to improve in that environment for referees, but also for the players to ultimately get the right decision, the consistency, and that common language piece, can lead to so much for individuals and teams. Those discussions around different uses of words in certain situations mean different things to different people, and then you end up with different outcomes, which obviously can have an effect on the spectacle as well. So, and
Yeah.
just pivoting a little bit to the 20-minute red card and the introduction of the 20-minute red card, like we've seen this in a positive light, but there's obviously been some challenges that have come up through it. Like, how do you see it's been going? Do you think it's a good intervention to be part of the game? We talked earlier around the technicalities and the challenges that players have around technically getting things right all the time. Do you think it's a good place to have the 20-minute red card?
Yeah, I was when it first came in, I wasn't sure, probably a little bit more skeptical about it. But I think generally what we've seen is, in the occasions that 20-minute red cards have been awarded, particularly at the international level, previously the game was very difficult to win if you received it. But now I think the games have been a lot more competitive, but when a 20-minute red card has been shown, and I think that was a large part of the reasoning behind it. I know World Rugby had done some twin modeling and used some AIs to figure out, would this actually have that desired impact, and I think that it has been the case. I do think the games are no longer dead rubbers after a red card are awarded really early. I think you're still at an obvious disadvantage, but the game still has to be won by the other team. It's not a given anymore. So I think from that point of view, it's been quite positive. I think Brendan the last day also spoke about this on the podcast, was just getting the calibration piece right about that, which we spoke about earlier as well, and what exactly constitutes a 20-minute red card, the full red card. So, as I said, I think November was a little bit of a perfect storm there on that, and we saw the red cards, we saw things being rescinded afterwards, and all these different things that happened. But hopefully we'll learn from that, and I think, well, I know the officials have really put in a bit of work behind that, and it'll be great to see the Six Nations. Hopefully we can see some really good consistency there, and again, if the unfortunate thing happens and we see a 20-minute red card, that the game still is competitive. So generally speaking, I think it's been a positive addition.
For Scott Barrett, Irish defence in close, being tested early. Bowden Barrett takes a good hit.
So we've talked a number of times about this clip, Felix, and a lot of comments from probably the process around it and the ability for the referee to be able to make the right call here. Like, what's your thoughts around the infrastructure for a referee to be able to get this right?
It's a really good question. So I'm not going to talk to the clip in terms of, the actual incident, in terms of like the technicalities of what happened with the players. I think the bigger question here, which we touched on earlier, is that I think one of the biggest frustration pieces here was, which doesn't really come across by just watching this clip in a replay like this, is that the people in the stadium couldn't see the replays because there was no big screen, and the referee then had to go down, I think it was to a corner to a small TV. I'm not sure if the fans could hear what the referee was saying or the TMO was saying, and I think the amount of time that all that took probably drove a lot of frustration and negativity around this clip, and ended up leading itself into November and the perfect storm that we spoke about. And I think it goes back to the investment piece again. If we can get to help the match officials, if we can get a minimum standard of the technology that they're guaranteed to be made available to them, and we get a minimum standard of what the fan is going to experience, and to feel connected, then I think we solve a lot of that negativity. I think it's when people are left bewildered about what's going on, and they're sitting there and there's nothing really happening from their point of view. It's just dead time. Then I think I understand the gripe that this can be a little bit boring. But if they're engaged in the process, even if the referee has to take a little bit longer to figure it out, like this one happened, he was trying to figure it out because he wants to make sure he gets the call right, which I think is massively important to keep the integrity of the elite game, where two of the best teams in the world playing. This call has to be made correctly. And safety. So this is a head contact. I have to make sure that this is looked at correctly with the correct amount of diligence. But if the fan is just kept engaged there, and they can see it, and they can see what the referee's looking at, and they can hear it, then I think we stop a lot of that. We mitigate a lot of that negativity.
But Felix, on that, then you are kind of, I suppose, admitting that the fan and the product, both for the fan in stadium and those watching at home, need to also be part of this, which I feel rugby has kind of forgotten about with all this head contact process and TMO interventions and bunker interventions over the last few years, that there is a paying fan that needs to be thought of in this whole process.
Yeah, and I've heard, Conrad, I've heard you mention before, trying to get a voice of the fan. Can we get an independent voice of the fan? Which is, again, I mean, very different, a very difficult thing to do, because we have some that will enjoy certain parts, some that won't. And getting that feedback in one coherent manner, I think is a tough job to do, but a really important one. And the more that we obviously sit on calibration calls, and referees have their meetings, and coaches have these discussions behind the scenes. In my opinion, the more that we can let the fan in on some of these processes, let the referees come out and say occasionally, we got this one wrong. This was our interpretation at the time because of XYZ, or we got this one right. It was a hugely controversial call, but we stand by this decision, and actually front footed. I know that's been done in other sports, and I think to great effect. But I think we're still probably stuck in rugby at the moment, rugby union, where we're not quite letting the fan in on some of these really good processes and good work that's going on behind the scenes, and huge amount of discussion that happens. And I think just opening that window a little bit, opening that crack, and letting them see, no, it's not thumb sucking. There's a huge amount of process behind it. So I think we can let them in a little bit more. And to your point there, minimum standards of technology, and minimum, increasing the investment piece around the world wherever we can to bring them along with us, then brilliant.
Because I suppose, like, listening to that, like the way you explain that, Felix, and because I completely agree, like, it's not so much like in our game, it's not as if we've got to throw the law book out, and it's not as if we've got a whole bad bunch of referees. It's actually how we support them, and how we actually understand and communicate the laws to the fans over broadcast in fan stadium, that actually is the step that we can do as a game to help with a lot of this. Is that then your view, like looking at the shape of the game, which we've been talking about? Are there law changes required? Like, hearing you, it's not about that. Is that your view? Yeah, we just need to focus on some of this other stuff to really sell our game.
Yeah, and I think approaching things with a positive mindset and will help a lot there. And probably the best one I can think of is the the application of the obstruction law regarding escort and glove, and I was really supportive of this when it was suggested, because one of the principles of rugby is contest, and we'd gotten to this stage. If you actually think back 2 years ago, where rugby was at, and there was huge amounts of negativity about the amount of kicking and the type of kicking. Everyone was saying the box kick is this negative thing, and why is a box kick negative? Why was the fan going, oh, here comes one? It was because they understood what was going to happen for the next 2 or 3 minutes, in my opinion, where they knew there was not going to be a contest at the back end of that kick, because people were obstruction. There was people blocking, doing the glove or the escort, which we were all coaching, and players were training and dedicating time in their week to do something which was fundamentally illegal. And I think the restoration of that aerial contest has really cracked the game open. There's more tries now at pretty much all domestic leagues, elite leagues, international rugby. When you compare it to, say, 2023 World Cup to now, or to the leagues in 2023 compared to now. And I think one of the reasons for that is that this contest has been restored. And what we're also seeing, in my opinion, is a more positive attitude towards it. The conversation back then, 2 years ago, was don't make a mistake, stay in the grind, just, who cares if it's boring, just keep doing it, and let's hope for an error at the other end. I mean, terrible for the sport. Whereas now it's get the ball back, let's expand your skill set. Can you take it overhead? Who can grab that 50-50 to open up a dynamic piece of play? We're going to be met with an unstructured piece then. Can we move the ball to space a little bit more effectively after then? And I think we've got to compliment the referees when they do things like this, and they do it well, and they push skill sets, they force positive change in the game. And I've heard some of the numbers that are thrown around statistically, that have been thrown around about major increases in kicking and scrums, and I'm looking at all the statistical companies and trying to figure out where these comments are coming from, because I don't see it. I don't think there are significantly more scrums or significantly more kicks in the game when we compare all these leagues, these international games, compared to 2-3 years ago. I think it's about the same, and the one thing that has been better is that there's now a contest, which is a principle of rugby. And I think that contest for the referees has been judged really fair. They've kept it pretty safe. And yeah, I think we should be celebrating when the officials do something positive like that.
Felix, I think, I speak for us all, really enjoyed hearing your input. I would love, there's another subject that we talk a lot about, that passionate for us as player advocates, and that's on the issue of player load. So we're just going to, if we park the law changes, we've really enjoyed the discussion, but I'd be really keen just to hear your thoughts, because we see the players that you coach in South Africa with a really challenging season as it currently is, under the current rugby landscape globally, whereby a lot of your players play in a domestic competition that is Northern Hemisphere based in terms of the season that it runs. But then when they get selected to play for South Africa, they play in a rugby championship, which is Southern Hemisphere based, over a Southern Hemisphere system, which leaves effectively your players, the South African national players, facing a 12-month season. It's not ideal. I think the management of your players has been incredible, and the success of your team speaks to that. Is it something sustainable, to be perfectly blunt, for South African rugby, or the way you manage it as a union or as a team? Is that something other countries can learn from? And just generally, I suppose, around the issue of player load, are players playing too much, or where does the onus lie for managing that for the players?
Yeah, it's another really difficult question, and I would definitely compliment the work that what you have done, Conrad, and everyone on your team have done around, I suppose, creating or increasing the awareness of player load, and that, I would say, is the most important thing. Is that if you compare it to when you were playing, or even a couple of years back, I don't think these conversations were being had. And now I'm certainly aware of it as a coach. I know the players are certainly aware of it. And obviously we're in a situation here in South Africa, like you mentioned, where things with the way the calendars are at the moment, that it is a topic that comes up regularly. I don't believe there's a simple answer to it at the moment. Maybe, and there is chat obviously around the potential of calendar globalization, or getting a common calendar across the globe. I think that would make a significant difference. But there's a lot of work to be done there behind that. So, what the document that you guys helped produce with alongside with World Rugby on the guidelines, I think is probably the best thing that's happened in recent years on this. It's very difficult to say how much is too much. That's like it's not as black and white as that, as we all know. Players are injured, players are involved, but they only play certain amounts of minutes. Players are under contract pressure where they want to play, they have to play sometimes. But I think the real positive about the whole thing is that in situations where people are going, or may need to go beyond the guidelines that have been recommended, is that there's a conversation around it now. And I think it's actually mentioned in the document that the gold standard is actually individualization around players' planning. And I think that's the main thing, is that this document is forcing conversations to be had, whereby when players are potentially exceeding what are the guidelines or the recommended load, that there's then a plan afterwards to go, okay, well, if they do push it here, there's going to have to be another recovery slot further down the line, and that's going to be individualized. It's going to be tailored to you to make sure that you do still recover and you do still make the best of what is a difficult scenario. So it's a really difficult one to say it's a knock it out, it's a home run, that's it, it's perfect. It's going to be a continued conversation. And I think the work that's been done is great. The individualization, I'll be a massive supporter of that there's, conversations between club, player and country. And finally, if that day ever comes where there's a globalized calendar, I think that would make a massive step, put a massive step in the right direction, and then complement the work that's been done to date.
Can I ask then, and you're in a coaching position, do you think even from a coaching perspective, it is like those conversations you talked about, they are being had more than ever, that coaches are conscious of player load, player burnout, and are they? I'm sure there's a lot of coaches around the world, they might not make the right decision all the time in terms of playing players too many times, but you can see that sort of perspective changing. Definitely.
In my experience anyway, definitely. And I'm seeing it happen. And obviously we're talking to different coaches around the world, let alone just in South Africa. It's definitely, you have to be talking about it as a coach. You have to be considering it as a coach now, in my opinion, for your own benefit and for the players' benefit. And I think 100%.
And players are obviously responsible as well, because I know, like, it's often the players that are at fault. Like, they're the ones, they want to make the team, so they'll keep playing even though they're tired. They'll push themselves and train when they probably told by a coach not to train. Like, it is, as you say, an incredibly complex issue. But I agree. I think the more it's being discussed by coaches, by players, by administrators that are constructing seasons and competitions, then hopefully we'll still be to get to the place where the player is looked after.
Great
stuff. Well, Felix, listen, we really appreciate you coming on the call and giving us your insight. What's the rest of 2026 looking like for you?
Some more meetings after this, and some planning. So we've got an interesting year coming up with obviously the Nations Cup and the greatest rivalry with New Zealand. So we've got a really exciting year with some new things on the horizon. So again, more positivity for people to get behind, and hopefully enjoy some rugby, enjoy some contested moments, some great moments of contest. Hopefully not get too bogged down on the referees or flow or anything like that. Let's enjoy rugby for its uniqueness and all the different shapes and sizes, and enjoy the contest.
A great message to finish with. So thanks to Felix joining us from South Africa, Conrad down under, and Rachel in London. We'll be back very soon with the next episode. In the meantime, follow us on social media and check out rugbyplayers.org for more. My thanks again to Felix, and we'll chat to you very soon.